All right, it's showtime. So,
Showtime.
so, uh, so yeah, I mean, we had quite a few people who kind of RSVP'd or whatever that is in LinkedIn to the event. So, looking forward to people joining this morning slash this afternoon. Um, you and I, I think sometimes we come into this, we don't really know what we're going to talk about. Today, we do know what we're going to talk about because you and I chatted yesterday and just kind of our normal bi-weekly chat. And we're just kind of catching up on things. And you'd asked me a question. I mean, it's been a tough year, as I've talked about a
Hmm.
lot over the last several weeks, months. But business has been down. I own my own company, a consulting company, marketing operations and demand gen. It's been a tough year. Marketing budgets have been slashed. And that really affects your mentality. And I think we all choose the path we choose in pursuit of happiness. And you asked me yesterday how I would rate my current happiness on a scale of 1 to 10, and I said 3. And can you shed some light on kind of where that scale came from? And
Yeah. Let's do it. So I guess the basis of this show was we're so I recently 6-8 weeks ago left the world of recruitment after 12 years. Ironically, the day I was due to leave, I got an approach from a university over here in the UK and decided to do another 6 months. But so the basis of this kind of happiness framework was I was speaking to a good friend who's a mindset coach, a guy called Christian Hoyle, who is fantastic, and I'd recommend if anyone is tuning into this to go and follow him. Really, really good guy with a solid background in business as well. Like he doesn't just talk about the things that you should do out of a textbook kind of playbook guy. He's done it. So he's built a business before, built a really reputable brand, and has done a really good job. But he came to me when I was really, really irritated with recruitment, and he just said, like, if you would score it out of 10, how would you feel? And I gave the same score as you. I was like 2 or 3. I was like, I'm just done. And they said, could you try and just get that up to a 5? Like, what would you need to do today to just get that up to a 5? Or what steps could you take to try and get that up to a 4 and then a 5? And then maybe in 6 months, a 6 or a 7. And I just found it like, you come across these little frameworks, and as simple as it sounds sometimes, it's a bit of a light bulb moment goes off. And because I've never thought of it like that. And I say after our chat, you haven't either. Because I guess sometimes you get too close to situations, right? And you don't have that ability to step back and zoom out. But analyzing it like that was a really cool way for me to say, actually, I'm a 3. This is what I don't like about it. These are the things I really, really dislike. These are things that aren't too bad. They're working pretty well. But these are things I have to fundamentally fix to get to a 5 on that happiness scale, or a 6 or a 7. If I can't fix them, I don't feel like I want to fix them, and it's time to call it. And that's where I got to. I called it. I mean, I'm backing it now for another project, a 6-month project, but that's going to be it. Like when this is done, it's totally done. So I think it was that. I guess that was the thing behind the framework. So it was kind of interesting to ask you yesterday how you felt about career stuff.
yeah.
And to get that response, actually, quite, because we've known each other for a while. We've spoken for a few years, and actually, it was interesting to get this response, but also kind of sad to hear that because you've always been someone that's really upbeat and happy and go lucky and always thinking about new ideas and building new things. And kind of sad to hear that you were like that unhappy with where it's at right now.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, it was when you mentioned the framework and the possibility of pushing it to a 4 or 5. I think that was the shift for me, the light bulb moment, right? Which I think it was for you too. That I think we feel like the world is black and white. Like we're either happy or we're not unhappy. We're either a 1 through 3 or we're a 9 or 10.
Mm.
And we forget about the in between. And we think that to be happy, we've got to change this 3 to a 9 overnight or somehow as quickly as possible. That's a huge chasm to cross, right? And I think it's just like exercising, losing weight. Like we have this goal, right? Of like, I want to lose 20 pounds. And you just forget about the in between. Well, what if you lost 3 this week? What if you lost 5 in the next 2 weeks? Like shrink the goal, shorten the time frame, right? And just kind of work incrementally and be intentional about hitting that next step as a stepping stone. You can't just jump the river. You got to find some stones to get across, right? And I think that was why it was so eye-opening. And one of the things I was thinking about after our conversation is we kind of know what a 9 or 10 would feel like, but I don't know if we know what a 9 or 10 is made up of, right? And so, like, what does have to happen in your life in that moment to be a 9 or a 10? And it's much more complex because it involves work, of course, but it involves family, it involves just how you feel about yourself, it involves so many different things that I thought about. Maybe it would be a good exercise to write out, if my happinesses are 9 or 10, what does that mean in my life? What does that mean for family, for work, for hobbies and interests, and list these things, and just kind of write that out, and then do it. Okay, what's a 5, right? And then that kind of gives me more concrete things to focus on. Like, I don't have to take my kids to Disney World this year. I could take them to Silverwood, this little thing we've got down the road, right? Like, how could I get to a 5 first, right? And what does that, what's the prescription, I guess, right? What's it made of? So I thought about that after our conversation too.
Yeah, and you know what I thought about was that through just a career lens, you mentioned there about like jumping the river on your if you're not happy, like what's the next step? How do you jump across that little hurdle to get to a 4, to get to a 5, to get to a 6? And actually, Travis, I think sometimes the honest answer is you just don't. You find a new river to jump because you're just not happy in doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm having this conversation with someone that I know right now. It's like they just aren't happy. That there's nothing about their career that makes them happy. And so that feels like a stretch to then get from a 3 to a 4 to a 5. Fundamentally, like if you aren't happy with the fundamentals of the work that has to be done to get to those stages, don't bother. Just don't bother. It's just not worth the hassle. Because when you get there, there's just going to be more shit piled on top.
Exactly.
So yeah, it was definitely an interesting. Where did you land with it? Like, where did you get to?
I haven't had a chance to write anything out or do anything. Because I've been so busy with projects and family and everything else, and I think that's part of the problem too, right? Is it's an interesting conundrum. I need more business, want more business, but I'm so busy that I don't have time to do business development. So why is that, right? So, and I think happiness is probably the biggest catalyst, or a lack of happiness is the biggest catalyst for most people who want to make a career change, career pivot. I think a huge blocker is our inability to deal with sunk costs. Especially the further we get in our career, the more we think, man, I spent 12 years doing this. Am I just going to throw it away? Is it going to mean nothing? Did I just waste 12 years of my life that I'll never get back? Or if you build a business, like I've had my business, Rainier Digital, since 2009, and I've either done it full time or used it as, for projects and side gigs. That's a long time. It is my first business I built, first one that was profitable. There's a lot of psychological baggage tied to it. One, the sunk costs of having it since 2009, the thing that it's, and I think this kind of relates to one of the things that I've heard in writing is, I can't remember the term right now, but it's basically like don't fall in love with certain things you write, right? You've got to be able to just throw it away and start over. And I think that can be the case for our careers too, right? And in our path. But I think it's also, when it comes to happiness, like, is it the line of work you're doing that's making you unhappy? Is it the people you work with? I think it's key to understand and identify what are the key elements
Mm.
that are making you unhappy. And will that change if you change careers? Right. I mean, there was a point in time where I really wanted to work for Microsoft. That was probably my main goal. And I didn't care how, but I hated recruiting. But I figured, hey, I'm doing that now. That could be my in, right?
Yeah.
I thought that just working at a company like Microsoft would give me all these opportunities that would change everything. But at the end of the day, I was still recruiting, and it made it that much more difficult, right? Because I was there, these opportunities didn't present themselves like I thought they would, and now I'm stuck in recruitment, right? Um, and so I think we have to sit down and take inventory of what's making us unhappy and how to really change it. Will what we think we're going to do actually change it or not? Right.
Yeah. Well, where does it all leave you though? Like, you're obviously running this company at the moment,
Mhm.
and you got these different challenges. You got like develop a new business, whatever challenges you got, like operationally. I'm not sure. I mean, you're pretty much locked down in that respect, aren't you? Doing a good job in terms of processes and things. But do you think you can change one of those fundamentals, let's say business development? Do you think you can get to a level where you are past that block? I mean, obviously you can, you just have to push through that. That's the reality of it, isn't it? But do you think you care enough about it to go past it? Because this is what this is all about, isn't it? One of my biggest blocks when I had the agency, the recruitment agency, was that I just hated doing business development. Part of the reason why, because it was incredibly like saturated. I'm not very good at it. I've not put much practice into it, and I just didn't want to do it. Like I just didn't, probably because I'm not very good at it. I didn't necessarily see results. Some people are great at it and they have much more success. Like perfect, go nuts. But do you think you're willing to change and push through that pain to grow a company that you potentially, I mean, maybe you do care enough about it, or potentially you don't? Are you at that point where you're willing to do that?
Yeah, I think a couple of weeks ago, I was at a crossroads where I had an interview with a company that was at the very, very tip top of my list of companies I would want to work for,
Mm.
and didn't move past the initial interview. And that was kind of it was depressing. It was that fork where it's like, okay, um, this either works out, and if it doesn't, then I'm fully committed to the path I was on, which is building this business.
Mm.
And I think when I look at like, why am I unhappy? Well, one, I'm not making enough money to feel secure. So I'm pretty much at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's really hard to write, create content, be creative, tap that part of your brain when you're worried about, can I pay the mortgage? Can I go to Costco, or do I need to like scale back? Or, I mean, it's just when you're thinking about that stuff, you can't think of the other stuff that you
Mm.
really need to think about. And then when I think about what I'm doing, it's hard being a solo person doing it all, right? And we all have strengths. And I know my strengths pretty well, and I know what I'm not as good at. Um and when you're a single person running everything, you have to do things you're not good at, and it makes it difficult because it takes you so much longer. You end up spending time there, you get frustrated. For me, my strengths are connecting dots, identifying problems, helping find solutions, problem solving. Um, having discovery calls. I actually like the business development piece of it. And if I could just focus all day on building relationships through social selling, through communities, engaging there, promoting my business, the services I provide, jumping on discovery calls, strategy calls, building roadmaps, building out the strategy, and then have someone else who can execute on the in the weeds HubSpot stuff, the building workflows, doing implementations. And I don't mind doing the onboarding. I don't mind doing the training. I enjoy teaching and problem solving and strategy. And so I think where I'm unhappy is I get a taste of those things I enjoy, but then I have to jump into the execution and doing the things that I enjoyed it more when I was learning, but now that I know it, it's more of a hamster wheel to me. And I would rather hand that off. And I think that's where my 3 is coming from. I think if I could find a way to make more money, kind of like what you're doing, right? You want to go with Dadversity, but you got to start to get revenue at some point. But in the meantime, you got to bridge that gap to also build that sense of security so you can focus on the creative parts and the building of Dadversity that you need to. And I feel like right now I just need to bridge that gap, get my income to a certain level where I can just like take a breath, not have to worry, and begin to focus on doing the business development, be in a position also to maybe hire someone as a contractor, come in and just say, hey, and they already know what they're doing. You know, I think the hardest thing is trying to train people when you don't have the time and you just need to slot someone in, hand it off, and have the confidence that they know what they're doing. So I can just sell, build strategy and just have that confidence like, hey, this is going to get taken care of. I'm going to pass this on. It's going to get done. And it's going to be done at a high level. If I could do that, it probably, if I could bridge the income gap, that'll push me to a 5, right? And then if I can make that higher and start to build my business and the vision that I have for the structure and the model, that would push me to an 8. I mean, it's that simple, right? It's like, it's not rocket science, but now it's just coming up with how, right? How do you do that?
You know, and I think using this framework oversimplifies it a little bit. I think it's to your point earlier. It's like, what are the smallest steps you can take right now? It's just improving the situation. Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm really intrigued about is people who are on the wrong career path, mm-hmm. and they kind of know it but don't know it yet, and so they go through this process, much like you are, I guess, building a business. There will be a stage where you're pulled away from doing the tasks that you enjoy doing most, because you have to focus on other stuff like hiring, like managing whatever people you hire, and the finance side, strategy stuff. Like, there's going to be a lot that comes your way as this thing grows. I'm really intrigued about how people should keep a sense of perspective when they're about to move into that next role or a new role, to maintain that level that they want to be at, that number 5, that 7, whatever that looks like out of 10. Because that's difficult, isn't it? Because as you grow into new positions and you get more responsibility, actually sometimes you're just pulled away from the type of work that you really, really enjoy doing. And that's not always easy to handle, is it?
Right. What impact do you think having and setting goals would have on that?
I don't know. It's a good point. See, I typically use OKRs, and I'm genuinely in a commercial setting, mm-hmm. and I'm genuinely considering setting these things for like personal stuff as well, either through Dadversity in terms of what I want to achieve with Dadversity, and where I want it to get to. But just in other stuff in life, like, you know, what does a good objective like for being a dad? Like, what does it actually look like? And being a husband, like, what does that look like? Because I don't think I'm excelling in any of those areas particularly well, because I put so much into work. other stuff just slides. And I know there's space to get better in every area that I'm operating in, but it's like, how do you measure that stuff, and how do you track it to a point where you are hitting these little mini objectives along the way, which, you know, when I say it out loud, actually, OKRs, doing this stuff and translating it to actual life seems like the really obvious thing to do. Mm-hmm. And then that at least gives you a mechanism to track your progress. So you don't lose months on months on months. You might lose the odd week here and there, or you might stray off track slightly, but actually they're there as that guiding kind of set of objectives to keep you on track. So I think that's probably the best way forward, Travis. For me, I think that's probably what I'm going to do. But yeah, I don't know. How would you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of OKRs, especially from a business perspective. I'm also a big fan of SMART goals, right? And all the elements of those. I mean, for myself, when I think about it, I don't really have any goals.
Same.
Like I used to be very goal driven. I used to have very specific goals that I was working towards, right? And those just kind of went away. And I think that is your rudder. And I think without it, you're just kind of blowing in the wind, right? And you don't really have any direction. You don't have any. And I think a lot of it is having goals or objectives.
Yeah.
Is your compass. And it's a decision-making mechanism as well, right? Because you can sit there and say, is what I'm doing right now getting me closer to these goals? Whether it's a family goal of spending more time, being disconnected from your phone, all the things that you've defined as what would make me a better husband, me a better dad, me better at what I'm doing as my career. Where do I want to go with these things? You know, like, and then it's you can use that to shape your actions in the moment. Your decision making gets easier because it's simple. Am I doing the most significant thing that I could be doing right now toward one of these things? And it could also be a hobby or an interest. Like, you don't want to feel bad for taking time out to learn or to read either, right? And so I think you need to factor those things into your goals of like, how do you want to live? What are the elements of your life that you need to factor in? Because that could make you unhappy too. If I sit there and I want to read, but then I'm thinking, well, this isn't getting me to my goal, then I'm just like feeling guilty. And that's the happiness that I'm pushing down, because it would make me happy to read, right? So I think it's a very complex thing that we're talking about. I think the fact we're both threes, I think the fact that we both feel like we don't have goals, I think that's maybe where we start, right?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, I don't. We're in semi-similar spot. I mean, for me, it's been a really interesting few weeks. You know, when I started Dadversity, 2 months ago now, and left that recruitment role to start this thing, and I was dead set on driving a taxi just to keep money coming in. And then obviously this project came along, and I decided to take that instead of doing the taxi stuff. But there will be a point when I have to do that stuff, probably in like 5-6 months' time or something. But yeah, I still didn't have a clear objective in terms of what Dadversity is going to become. It was more a case of, right, I'm going to give this 6 months. Let's go after like sponsorship from the podcast, and let's try and grow it that way and get some kind of cash through the door. But that's not a plan, is it?
Right.
Just
that's
random.
Hope. Like, I think we talked about hope yesterday, right? Like,
hope isn't a strategy and all that. But that's what it was. It was like, well, maybe if we get to a couple of thousand dads in the community, a brand will come along and chuck a few grand at us to sponsor a podcast. And maybe they will, but it's not a great plan. I don't have a list of ideal companies. I'm not sure of the contacts there. I've not really done any groundwork. I've not set the scene. Like, I've not done anything. So there's a lot. But even talking through that there in terms of what I should do with the ideal contacts and companies, you just realize how much work goes into this stuff and how much you suddenly get pulled away from the content creation, which is what I really want Dadversity to be for me, the majority of the time. And as it gets bigger and grows and more dads come along and we have to do more logistical problems, I'm naturally just going to have to move away from that role. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I certainly won't. There won't be the breadth of content and the ideas that are flowing and getting involved in all of that stuff every single day. So yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough to figure out. It's really, really tough to figure out. But I think for me, the thing I land on is this: having OKRs or an equivalent of them for your career-based stuff. And at the end of every kind of month, a quarter, just going back to that framework of how you're feeling out of 10. What can you do to get to that next level? And what changes you need to make to get to that next level is probably where I'm going to land with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we only have a couple of minutes. We've got a hard stop here in 3. 2 things. One, there's a comment from Maya.
I've just read that, Did that just land? Did we read that at the same time?
Yeah. Just saw it. And then I've got a challenge that we can maybe homework for us and maybe anybody listening, watching before next week. So do you want to address Maya?
Yeah, I do. So Nathan, love the idea of applying OKR goals to parenting. How do you measure that? Maybe in the endearing moments with your children, the small little I love yous and the smiling faces when you put your work phone down to play. So the first thing you should know, Maya, is I am just very, very, when it comes to kids and stuff, I'm just like an emotional guy when you speak about the kids.
I can hear it.
So, oh man, honestly, they kick your ass, don't they? So what do I need to do from an OKR perspective with the kids and the family? I need to be more present for sure. I've spent trying to grow Dadversity, working this contract is basically meaning I'm working to probably 9-10 o'clock most nights. Now I obviously take a couple of hours out between 6 p.m. 8 p.m. bath time, book, bedtime, usual routine. So I'm always present for that. I think I need to just get rid of but I need to get rid of my mobile. Like I need to get rid of it. The amount of time I spend scrolling on just crap throughout the weekend or through the week is just painful for me. And so I probably need to build something like that into there as well. And you're right. Some of the little touches like little I love yous matter a lot. School drop-offs. I've done it today. I was due to pick Milo up, my little guy from school at an hour and a half ago. And I realized I had a meeting in my calendar for work. So I had to call my wife to go and pick him up. And so, stuff like that, you don't want to be getting into that, right? I certainly don't want to be getting into that routine where it's like, did you set the danger that works the precedent and you can't get away from it. So, yeah, it's a tough one. It really is. But I genuinely don't know what the answer is. Like until I sit down and go through it. And actually, like if you want to hit connect, we can go through it together and like, always open to chatting about this stuff. But we've got, like for context, we've got a group called Dadversity, and there's a bunch of dads in there who go through similar challenges. And I'm probably going to open this up to them as well, and maybe create like a template or something for them to think about. So I think it's a massive topic, and I don't think there's a framework right now for dads to figure it out. What do you think, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is very complex.
Yeah,
very, very complex and nuanced, right? And I have to jump to another meeting. The thing I wanted to mention was an exercise I've done in the past was that I think could be good for us and anyone watching is try to take today, October 4th, and try to think about what does your life look like on October 4th, 2025 or 2028. How old will you be? How old will your kids be? What will your typical day be looking like, you think? What will you be doing? And why would you be an 8 in terms of happiness on that day, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now? So interesting thing to ponder, to try to look into the future of things, which is hard because nobody can predict the future. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for the engagement, Kyla and Maya. sorry we have to go. We could keep going on this for a while. But yeah, maybe we'll pick it up a little bit next week, and then we'll have another topic to riff on next week. But yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks, folks. See you soon.